Hello and welcome to this 2020 International Conference on Men's Issues special edition of Gender Matters with your hosts, me, Mike Buchanan, and Elizabeth Hobson, the founder and leader of the political party Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them, respectively. This is the second of our two interviews with Dr. Warren Farrell, a legend to people with an interest in men's issues. Warren, I had the pleasure of meeting you and your wife in 2014 near Detroit at the first international conference on men's issues. We were both speakers and you delivered a well-received keynote speech. We'll put links to that speech in the low bar, along with links to the conference video playlist and the playlists of all the later men's issues conferences. On to my first question. There's a broad consensus across the men's rights movement these days that feminism has been a toxic ideology from the outset. Feminism has never, or at best very rarely, been the pursuit of gender equality, but rather the pursuit of female supremacy, enabling women to wield ever more power over men, mainly through the state's actions and inactions. The privileging of women and girls inevitably results in the disadvantaging of men and boys. Warren, you were famously a prominent feminist for many years. I wonder if you could give us your current thoughts on the ideology.
Yes, boy, very, very complex question and answer. Excuse me. As you know, recently Helen Reddy died, and she did the song "I Am Woman, I Am Strong." And feminism has, in a sense, evolved from "I am woman, I am strong" to "I am woman, I've been wronged." We've gone from empowerment feminism to what I would really call toxic feminism. And to victim feminism, and to the honing of victimhood as a fine art. Victim power has been really very core to feminism recently. And I am deeply sad about that. I am a very, very strong supporter, always have been, always will be, of empowerment feminism, of true empowerment feminism. Feminism did a number of things early on. It adopted a strategy that is very good for political victory, which is objectifying, finding an enemy and objectifying them as if they are an enemy. It is a unifying phenomenon in the human psyche to be more activated to do battle when you find an enemy to fight that's worthy of fighting. The problem is that and we had a couple of really powerful examples of that. We had the civil rights movement, in which there was a history of oppressor and oppressed. Then we had the gay rights movement, and in which there was a history of clear discrimination against gay people. We had Marxism, in which there was a framework of oppressor and oppressed. And so when the women's movement surfaced, there was a natural evolution to oppressor and oppressed as a modality, as a hierarchy. And the assumption was that people who made more money were people who were more privileged. And so because in Marxism, the people who were the oppressors made more money, and the oppressed made less money. But we miss completely what was really happening there. With men and with women, men often felt we learned to define power as feeling obligated to earn money that someone else spends while we die sooner. And that's not a good definition of power. If I were to run a women's conference and say, I'm running this conference to empower women. I'm going to teach you all how to feel obligated to earn money that someone else will spend while you die sooner. The women would kick me out of the conference. They'd be too intelligent to accept that definition of power, but that's basically the definition of power that men have accepted. And so we started looking at things that was hard news data, like that men earned more money than women. And men did earn more money than women, but there were two enormous tricks to that. One is they didn't earn more money than women for the same work, the same type of work. And as I started looking at that more carefully, and I wrote a book called Why Men Earn More and what the startling truth behind the pay gap and what women can do about it. And I looked at the 25 differences between what men and women do to earn money, or to have and found that everything that men did, like being willing to do hazardous jobs, being willing to do dirty jobs, being willing to travel to undesirable locations, and being willing to work late at night, and so on. All these things were things that men were much more likely to do, and people who earned more money were likely to do. But women were more likely to balance their lives, particularly if they had children, between the children and their work. And we found that people who have balanced lives are, generally speaking, happier. But that if women did the same things that men did, they could probably, the data seem to reveal that on average, they would out earn men by a few cents. There's so much complexity to that data. That's not 100% for sure, but it looks like that, when I can be as objective as possible. And so we were hearing from everybody that men earn more money than women for the same work. And I have to tell you that if men earned $1 for each 99 cents that women earned, I would be back to feminism again, because from my perspective, undervaluing women is not okay. That was just plain not the case. So example, women who have never had children and never been married, they out earn men by 17%. And they have out earned men, not by that much, but they've out earned men since the 1970s if there were women who have never been married and never had children. Because when women are not married and not have children, they start doing a lot more things that are focused on their career. When they are married and have children, they are much more likely to commute less to work so they can be with their children more. They start doing things like, if they're working full-time, they cut back on the number of hours that they're working full-time so that they can be responsive to the children. If a child calls in being sick, they will tell you that the children come first, their job comes second, and that's understandable, and that's important for the children. But we can't expect employers to pay for people that are absent, and so there were so many things that were supposedly data that so if you ask the average person in a developed country, do men earn more money than women for the same work? Virtually 99% of people will say yes, that's true, and it's just plain not true. And thinking that way is undermining women's ability to know what are the 25 things that it takes to earn as much or more than women, if earning more than earning more than men, if earning more than a man is what your goal is. Second, women will oftentimes complain about things like, a man can be a have-it-all woman. A man can be a have-it-all man, but a woman, she can't be a have-it-all woman. And that's just plain not true. So for example, a woman who wants to be a have-it-all woman, and which would be, let's say, defined as have a really powerful career, have a happy marriage, have successfully raised children. And so a woman can do that if she finds one of the 49% of men who would prefer to be full-time involved with their children than full-time involved with their job. That is, the Pew Research Center asked men who were working full-time, would you prefer to work, who had children, would you prefer to work full-time or to be full-time involved with the children? 49% of them said that I'd prefer to be working full-time with my children, but the family needs the money. That's the way I love the children. And so that mentality, so if a woman wants to be a have-it-all woman, we have to be working with women to have a different modality of the way they select men. Nowadays, very successful women still tend to look for men who who are as successful or more successful, or will someday be as successful or more successful. And so as opposed to look for among those 49% of men who are motivated, who care, but who have wonderful emotional intelligence and caring skills, and would be fine about being home with the children full time if that's what the best arrangement was for her to be a have-it-all woman. And more importantly, he'd be the type of personality that would nurture and listen to her when she comes home with problems and challenges from work at the end of the day. He can support her and support the children. The crucial variable as to whether or not that would work is whether or not the woman will respect a man like that. If a woman does not respect a man, she cannot love a man.
Oh, my understanding, Warren, it's been some years since I researched this, but the research seemed to show that the divorce rate of working women and stay-at-home fathers was sky high. It was just sky high. And I guess also this direction that you're calling for is also in a way an appeal for women to drop hypergamy. And that's not going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen this side of Christmas, Warren, is it? Let's be honest. But well, can I just before we come to Elizabeth's first question, I wonder, and this isn't something that I rolled by you beforehand, but it's just occurred to me. I wonder if you use the word toxic to describe feminism in the current era. Are there any other adjectives that come to mind? I'd just like to get a sort of flavor for what you think of what feminism is today.
It is largely victim feminism, and victim feminism that is not accountability feminism. When we respect somebody, we hold them accountable. And when we have hashtag Me Too, that's wonderful. Having women share feelings and fears that they had and ways that they felt hurt. But to have hashtag Me Too for women only is a hashtag Me Too monologue when men have also their ways of being hurt, and to not even think about having a hashtag Me Too dialogue where men and boys and men's issues are talked about. How do boys feel when they're in school and they're being told the future is female? How do boys feel when they're in school and they're told that if they reach to touch a woman's hand that they've asked out on a date and she said yes? And in California, what I'm going to say now is law. You're in college and you reach out to hold the hand of a woman you have asked out on a date and she said yes. If you don't ask for permission, you have not asked for affirmative consent, and you can be accused of being a sexual harasser. Now, 99.9% of women would not do that unless there was a breakup in the relationship where he broke up with her, and then retrospectively, she might say, he never asked me for permission before he held my hand. And so on the one hand, he's being told, make sure you ask for permission before you hold a woman's hand. On the other hand, he's noticing that a lot of the women are really attracted to men who are far more assertive than that. And if he starts asking for the woman to, may I hold your hand? May I kiss you? May I kiss you on the cheek? May I kiss you on the lips? May I kiss you with the tongue? The woman's going to go, my God, that's about as unromantic as can be. You're some type of wimp. But if he's had a bad experience and he says, not only do I have to ask you that question, but because it's a he said, she said, I better give you a hundred or so pieces of paper to sign to make sure that at each stage of sexual assertiveness that I have permission. I mean, the woman is going to go, you must be kidding. It's like, nothing. It's completely not understanding of relationship. But more important than that, what the feminist movement is not doing is saying, we want women to learn how to be risk takers. We want women to learn how to share responsibility. So let's make sure we have in 7th and 8th grade women trained to share the risks of rejection. Because when women are trained to share the risks of rejection, then men will know who the women want. And when women are trained to kiss the man first, they're asking for what they want. We have to remember that marriages are made or broken largely by women who are happy or not happy. A happy wife is a happy life is very accurate.
Oh, dear.
John Gottman has done some good work on this issue and documenting this. And so if a happy wife is a happy life for the man and for the woman, then it stands to it is in women's interest to be socializing women to be the ones to do original choice power rather than veto power. By original choice power, I mean looking around at the party and saying, there's a man with energy he's not interrupting women, he's listening to a woman. I like that energy. And now maybe that man is not the doctor or the lawyer or the CEO in the room. Maybe he's just a caring, loving man, but maybe that's what you need or want. So you go up and talk to him. You initiate the conversation. If he doesn't ask you for a card or contact, you ask him for contact, or don't even wait to ask him for contact. And you call and you take the first initiative. Have a different type of man, but it's a man where original choice power is working. What often happens for women is that women, especially attractive women, they get approached by men who are able to handle rejection. But in order to handle rejection, they've had to learn to objectify women because it hurts less to be rejected by an object than it does to be rejected by a full human being. So the men who are able to go after very successful women have been able to sort of go from woman to woman to woman and be able to handle that rejection. And the result is when he does get her, he's also the type of man that goes on to another woman. And because he's really good looking, he usually gets responsiveness to another woman. And so women who wait for men to get to them have veto power. The man comes up to them and says, he finds out that Elizabeth or somebody else likes a certain type of play or movie or whatever, or to go to, or a concert. And so he says, I have 2 tickets to this concert, which he plans ahead of time. And, and the woman says, well, okay, I'm really not that interested in him, but I'd like to go to the concert. But then the concert leads to something else, and she's only dealing with veto power. What she needs to be doing is dealing with original choice power. If women are happy when they have the man they want, they should be choosing from among men rather than just responding yes, no to a man. And so these are all the things that a real empowerment feminism should be doing. Victim feminism is getting the women to focus on what the man did wrong, as opposed to taking the risks of rejection themselves, having that original choice power. That's what I want for women. That's what and when women do this, and we ask women to be accountable when they overreach or underreach just to the same degree that we ask men to be accountable, then we will have increased respect for women. We protect people who are children. We respect people who are accountable. And the feminist movement has undermined the respect that people have for women. Mentors are very important for women to advance in corporations. And the 15, 16 male corporate executives that I have spoken to since #MeToo, out of those 15 or 16, 100% say, I would not mentor a woman today because there's too much vulnerability. I could lose my job so easily. Even if I mentor the woman without taking any sort of sexual overtones or whatever, if I hold her hand while she's crying, if I'm in the office with her, I'm gossiped about. If I close the door, I'm gossiped about. If I take her out to dinner, I'm gossiped about. And I have a family, and I have a reputation that I built. What do I have to gain by mentoring a woman anymore? And that's undermining women.
Okay.
Feminism is toxic today.
Toxic. I think I'd say it's been toxic since about 1848, the Seneca Falls. Warren, but you and I will disagree on that. I think it's been absolutely toxic right from the beginning. However, wherever we place that, just very quickly before we come on to Elizabeth's first question, I need to explain very briefly why I look so shocked at your expression, happy wife, happy life. I don't know of any other expression that can be guaranteed to make an MRA's head explode more than that, because to most MRAs, it's an absolute distillation of gynocentrism, and so I apologize. It was honestly, I didn't intend to sort of, but it is just one of those terms that MRAs find difficult. So I apologize.
May I work with that for a moment?
Of course.
It is an amazing term because, first of all, if I say this in a men's locker room, almost every man would roll his eyes and say, yeah, you're right. And most women will say, yep, that's true. You're a man that knows that. Great.
Right.
But the term is enormously insulting. It's insulting because it means that women are in control. So yes, the MRA role, it's a toxic phrase for the MRA. It should be toxic to MRAs, but I'm talking about it as a reality of women's power, not about what I desire to have be in the future if we really have equality between men and women. Okay. And so this is not a desire, but it is the reality of women's power that no one is recognizing or acknowledging, even as, ironically, everyone is recognizing and acknowledging it. But it's an enormous insult to women, and it is an enormous insult. And the fact that everybody agrees with it, it's one of the really phenomenal phrases of our time.
Okay, thanks for that explanation, Warren. That's great. Elizabeth, over to you.
Well, Warren, you've been working towards the establishment of a White House Council on Boys and Men since 2009. It appears to me that Donald Trump is the most pro-male American president in the modern era, while Joe Biden seems regressively feminist.
Yes.
Which of those candidates do you think would be most likely to initiate progress for men and boys, including launching the White House Council on Boys and Men?
Certainly, the answer is Donald Trump. And the answer is the Republican White House would definitely be more interested in that. And so let me work on the data behind that rather than just being a statement. I went out to, when I created the coalition to create the White House Council on Boys and Men, I was very adamant that it should be a bipartisan or multi-partisan coalition. And so I went out to interview the Democratic presidential candidates in Iowa while they were all in Iowa. And I interviewed 7 of them in depth. And those interviews, by the way, are on my YouTube channel, so you can check them out for yourself. And a number of the Democratic candidates were reasonably responsive to the importance of a boy crisis and the importance of dad involvement. However, and the 2 that were most responsive were Andrew Yang and John Hickenlooper. But their campaign managers were very fearful of them articulating a positive focus on boys and men's issues because they felt that they would undermine their political base of both feminists and also women who are divorced who wanted to be fully involved with the children and not have the man involved with the children. And they also felt it would be taken the wrong way by single mothers, of which 40% of all women who have children in the United States have children without being married. The 53% figure that I gave you before was for women under 30. And so the campaign managers of the Democratic candidates were very fearful of their candidate speaking up proactively about the boy crisis. Andrew Yang did bring it up for a minute or two in one debate. John Hickenlooper tried to, but couldn't get in at the right moment. Now, while I was speaking about these issues, some people from the White House saw me. Actually, from HHS, Health and Human Services, saw me and recommended me to the White House. And then I was invited to the White House and sat around the table with about 13, 14 other people. And they were mostly from the White House. Some were from DOJ, the Department of Justice. Some was from HHS, Health and Human Services. And when I talked about the importance of dad and the importance of the family and the importance of faith-based communities, they were like just totally on board, nothing but like, yes, we need to do this. Now, they did ask me to write a speech for President Trump. And I did. And so far, he hasn't delivered that speech or some version of that. But on the other hand, there's a lot going on. Now, Biden versus the White House. Here's the perfect example. One of those 14 people at the White House meeting was Katie Sullivan. Katie Sullivan had been in charge of HHS's work before. She is now the principal deputy assistant attorney general of the United States. She previously had been involved in women's issues, and she tried to get the women's shelters, instead of having women who come to the shelters, instead of having them come to the shelters and then try to persuade them to never see the man that was supposedly in domestic violence mode with them. She tried to get them to be able to learn good communication skills and other skills that would have them do their relationship much more effectively in the future. She said to me personally that I was not able to penetrate the absolutely entrenched feminist bureaucracy that runs every single woman's shelter in this country. I was not able to get them to do anything more constructive. They were treating men as if they were the enemy, as opposed to treating the domestic violence as something that is usually a two-way street. We now have more than 150 studies that have been done showing that domestic violence is more than equal female to male versus male to female. And it's slightly more than equal female to male, even when women say, who was the person who hit first? Women acknowledge that they were more likely to hit the man, their husband, their boyfriend first. In dating situations, this is like 4 or 5 to 1. Women acknowledging that they hit their boyfriend before the boyfriend hit them, or they were the only ones to hit. And yet we're talking about men being made as the enemy. So now back to Biden. Biden was the one that created the Violence Against Women Act. He was the primary instigator against this, that created these shelters that were only women's shelters, that were no men's shelters, that is a clear violation of the Constitution, of the Equal Protection Clause. It's also discriminating against women. Why, if a man and a woman gets into a fight, should only the woman be forced to, only the woman have a shelter to go to? Why shouldn't the man be the one to leave the house as much as the woman is the one to leave the house? And what those shelters' jobs should be is exactly the opposite of what Biden has set up those jobs, the job of the shelter to be. The job should be to heal the relationship, to develop better communication. And so one of the purposes of my developing this couples communication course on Zoom is to be able to have this distributed to women's shelters. But Kate Sullivan has been very forthright with me about the fact that the women's shelters, even though she was supposedly in charge of the entire operation, she couldn't make any dent in the rigidity of the infrastructure of the bureaucracy of women, feminist women, who almost 100% run those all female shelters and no equivalent male shelters. So I hope that made it really clear what the answer is.
It did, Warren. Thank you.
Absolutely clear. Thank you so much.
Warren, I think our viewers would be very interested to hear your thoughts on many men's issues, but our time is limited, so I'll limit myself to 2 of them. The first is abortion. Both Elizabeth and I are pro-life, and we find most MRAs do not support the killing of unborn children. What are your thoughts on abortion? And the second issue is male genital mutilation, MGM. You're probably aware of the physical damage that is always caused by it, and the psychological damage often caused by it. Intactivists around the world look on the United States with utter horror at the high prevalence of MGM carried out in the US on cultural grounds, a matter explored memorably in Brendan Marotta's film, American Circumcision. What are your thoughts on the procedure of MGM and the likelihood of it eventually being banned in the US?
Yes. Do you want me to start with the abortion or the circumcision?
Please, Warren, yes.
The abortion. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Abortion is the whole focus on it's women's body, it's women's choice, is basically a fraud, and here's why. When we have legal cases of a man and a woman contributing egg and sperm in a petri dish, and then looking at who has the rights have almost always been given to the female, even though it is not in her body. This is in a petri dish. And so we're really talking, when we have surrogate parenting issues, the surrogate parent, the parent that creates the contract has the power and is legally given the award of the children, even if the fetus and embryo that is in the female body, the surrogate body, begins to trigger hormones that makes the surrogate say, I really feel attached now to this child, this embryo / child. I therefore want the child because it's my child. It's my body, my choice. The courts almost always rule in favor of the person who signed the contract to have that surrogate carry that child, and then the child being the mothers and fathers. So in both cases, this is not in the woman's body. And so the fraud of saying women's body, woman's choice is really, just a couple of many good examples of that. Another dimension of that is it's more than a woman's body. When a man and a woman creates the fusion of creating a child, they're creating the fusion of potentially parenting that child, which requires sacrifices of both their bodies. A woman's body does go through a very powerful, emotional, sometimes traumatic experience. And a man who's a father commits to 18 to 21 years or more of his life doing work that earns more money, and work that earns more money is usually less fulfilling work. Oftentimes in doing the hazardous jobs and jobs like or if he's less educated, going to the military and risking his life dying, means that his body his stress levels are significantly at risk during those periods of time. And that's part of what leads to men dying sooner, of 9 out of 10 causes of death, and dying on average 5 years sooner than women. And so the sacrifice of body for the creation of an infant is on the woman's part in one way and the man's part in another way. So what I say in the Boy Crisis and in Father and Child Reunion book, I outline very in depth men's ABC rights. And right now we have ABC rights for women: the abortion, the birth control method, pill, diaphragm, IUD, the caring arrangement, adoption, dad giving time with the parent, dad not giving time with the parent. Courts uphold the fact that a man, even who doesn't even know that he has a child, and the woman informs him of that after 18 to 21 years, the man is then required to pay for the child he never knew he had for 18 to 21 years. This is the law in many states in the United States, and so on. And so so those are ABC rights for women: abortion, birth control right, also a second B right, believability on the part of the woman, which is always greater than believability on the part of the man. And then C, the caring rights, a woman having those, the ability to put it up for adoption, and again, put it up for adoption without even informing the man that he has a partnership in the process. So here is what I recommend. First of all, that there be a very different view of this process. That there is 3 sets of rights that are in motion here: the right of the mother, the right of the father, and the right of the embryo or the fetus to become a viable, cared for human being. There's 2 catastrophes that are possible. One is having aborting a child is one, and having an unwanted child is another. So the best contract that I can think of is for the law to state that there's about a 5-day rule, 4 days, 6 days, whatever rule, that when a woman discovers she's pregnant, she is required to notify the man or the men she believes are the possible fathers immediately, so that the process of deciding whether there's an abortion or there's or whether there is a desire to have that child can be made by both the mother and the father right from the beginning. And then number 2, if the mother says, I do not want this child, I'm not ready for it, I have different goals, I want to abort the child, and the father says, I am interested in raising this child, I will have a notarized statement saying that I will take economic responsibility and I will be emotionally involved with that child, then the fetus's right to become a child should prevail. The fetus has the right to live if it can be taken care of economically and emotionally. And the mother and the father has the right to know this immediately so that he can go through the same type of hesitation, doubt, thinking through process. And so that if there is an abortion, because both of them don't want the child, that abortion can be done in the first month or the first few weeks of that child being discovered to be a fetus in the mother's womb. There is no perfect answer to the abortion question. It is like an answer of, I believe that when we kill animals, and I still eat some meat. Not very much, but I do eat some. And so I am involved in the killing process. My wife has had an abortion. And so they're not for me, but it has, there is that in her life. It is a terrible thing to have an abortion. And it's also a terrible thing to have a child who's unwanted. And so I think the best way of solving that problem is to make sure that we have 3 parties of interest involved. And if there's any way, shape, or form that anyone, father or mother, can volunteer to take care of that child emotionally and economically, that should prevail.
Thank you, Warren. Absolutely fascinating. Fascinating.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And MGM.
Yes, let me take a drink of water between. Okay, male genital mutilation is, first of all, I'd like to give you a little bit of background on this, okay? The more warrior-oriented the culture is, the more likely it was to circumcise the male. Not just to circumcise the male privately at an early age, but to wait for puberty and to march that male into the center of the community, and for the community to surround that male. This is if it was a warrior culture, and to and have that male at the age of about 13 or 12 be mutilated or circumcised in front of the entire community. And if that 12, 13-year-old boy winced while he was being cut, he was seen as not worthy of entering into manhood and male approval, because what that culture needed is a male who was perfectly okay with being disposable. And
sorry, Warren, I know this happens in some African tribes to this day.
Yes, absolutely. And with very, I describe some of the rituals around this in the Boy Crisis book, and it's really quite fascinating. There are many really good people that are working, like Stephen Svoboda is a very good friend of mine who is with ARC, the Attorneys for the Rights of the Child. And so we have done, so originally for many, many years, we did almost no research on what the outcome of circumcision was, because no one cared enough about whether men were hurt psychologically or physically or in any way about being disposable, because our investment as a survival society was to bribe men to risk pain and disposability, not to worry about what what the risks were. That's why we didn't do studies on football. That's why we didn't do studies on circumcision. It's all part of the same process of training men in every culture to be disposable and to look at it in a positive way, that they have an opportunity to die in war. And then, which is bad enough, but it's to then turn around and call these men privileged to be willing to die so that women can be entitled to have a life of loving and being loved as opposed to killing and being killed is just really amazing.
Okay.
So
can I ask Warren, sorry, time's pressing a little bit and we need to come to Elizabeth's final question, but do you find yourself, knowing as many people as you do, are you optimistic that the day is coming when America will make it illegal and enforce that?
I believe some states probably will begin to make it illegal first, and then it will be a little bit like gay marriage. It'll happen state by state, and then it will begin to develop a greater sense of education and consciousness. Most people in the United States are not even educated about it, and you don't want to really put up something for a legal review until that there's at least a certain percentage of people that are likely to support it.
What sort of time frame there? A few years, or?
I would imagine somewhere between 7 and 20 years to begin to make significant progress in that direction.
I mean, that would be a wonderful day when a state does that. Okay, yes. Thank you, Warren. Absolutely fascinating. Elizabeth, over to you.
Thank you. So I've recently interviewed Martin Seeger, also for the ICMI20. He's a consultant clinical psychologist and founding member of the Male Psychology Network here in the UK. And he's got some really interesting and important things to say. One finding of his, along with John Barry, was that not only is the feminist theory of hegemonic masculinity useless for explaining the vast majority of behaviors exhibited by men and boys, but that positive attitudes to masculinity are protective of the mental health of men and boys and can even serve as a defense against suicidality. Martin, along with several co-authors, also advocates for a new understanding of masculinity based on archetypes rather than stereotypes. So instead of assuming that we should socially condition boys to be more like girls, we should accept that masculine characteristics that of course are not confined exclusively to men and boys, like biological drives to be strong, to provide and protect, run deep. We therefore need to respond to men and boys in distress, bearing that in mind. Tailor our messages and approaches when supporting men and boys to accommodate what is already in them, not what we think should be in them if they weren't so emotionally illiterate. Yeah. So I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on Martin's ideas. I imagine you might have some nuanced caveats, but it strikes me that there's a rather beautiful confluence between his work and yours, both of which can ultimately lead us to more humane, more empathic, and more effective ways of supporting men and boys.
Absolutely. I had the honor and the pleasure of spending a couple of days with Martin Seeger and John Barry when I was in England speaking to the British Psychological Association, where we're trying to get that approved, and two of them have been so devoted and made such good contributions. So let me deal with hegemonic masculinity first. Imagine being told as a woman that you are, you should be thinking of yourself as a real female if you were willing to die in that nation's war. If you were expected to take all the hazardous jobs, and that 93% of the people that died at hazardous jobs would be you, a woman, and you'd be considered more feminine if you took all the hazardous jobs. And that if you were married, that your job as a woman would be to give up doing what you wanted to do to make sure you provided enough money to support the family. And if your husband had 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 children, you were expected to provide enough money to be part of those 3 or 4 or 5, 6 children. Now, the people who understand this in the world better than anybody else are the millennials who are in Japan. they have a game called Kiroshi. The game Kiroshi, Kiroshi means in Japanese, death at the desk or death from overwork. So this game that the millennials play called Kiroshi, each person has a figure, and the person who wins at the Kiroshi is the person who is able to climb to the top of the ladder of the corporation or the business or be most successful first. And by the time the one who wins gets the privilege of committing suicide. What the millennials are seeing is that that masculinity is not hegemonic. It's a prison that men have been put in by trained to think of themselves as being powerful by, as I said before in the last interview, earning money that somebody else spends while they die sooner. And dying sooner is not hegemonic. It's not about power. It's about a type of powerlessness. Mm-hmm. And we've bribed men with social bribes to think of themselves as heroes and powerful if they follow all the rules of this prison to earn more money that someone else spends, as opposed to having what women have when a child is born and they're a middle upper class child in a family, and both the man and the woman are working. The woman, when there's a pregnancy, says, okay, I have three choices now. I can continue working full time, I can be with the children full time, or I can do some combination of both. And the man says, well, I have three choices too. I'm hegemonic. I can work full time, I can work full time, or I can work full time. Without even understanding that, that he's just following whatever the woman says. And if the woman decides to be full-time with the children, which in the United States, 40% of married women who have children are full-time with the children, 40% work full-time, but usually fewer hours than they did before, and 20% work part-time. Whereas the male is much more likely to work full-time. And as you pointed out before, Mike, when he doesn't work full-time, when he's home with the children full-time, while that is often a potentially good solution, often the woman loses respect for him, and the respect means the beginning of the deterioration of the marriage. So if we look at those things, men are far from hegemonic. If we look at the fact that the streets are filled with many more homeless men, the prisons are filled with many more men than women, the male suicide rate is so different for males and females. If men were hegemonic and had real, genuine power, we wouldn't have the statistics of men and women at the age of 9 committing suicide equally. But at the ages of 10 through 14, the male suicide rate is twice that of the female suicide rate. That's not hegemonic. Between the ages of 15 and 19, the male suicide rate is 4 times that of the female rate. Between the ages of 20 and 25, it is 5 times that of the female rate. That is not about hegemony. That is not hegemonic in any real sense of the word. And so, Martin and John Barry are right on target with questioning that one of the biggest ways of being in prison is to not realize you're in prison. When many of you have listened to my TEDx talk on the boy crisis, know that I spent an hour talking to a compatriot of yours named John. And he was talking to me about how he joined a men's group that I formed. And in the process of joining that men's group, one of the questions I asked the men's group to ask is, what is the biggest hole in your heart? And when it came around to John, John said, the biggest hole in my heart is that I was so involved with my business that I ended up giving up my contact with my child, and I giving up contact with my wife. I eventually got a divorce. And what I'm afraid of now, Warren, he said he told the men's group, is that that my new wife has a child, is pregnant, and we've just found out that it's a boy, and I'm afraid I'm going to do the same thing with the second boy as I did with the first boy. And he said, the men's group said to me, have you talked to your wife? What would you like to do if you could do anything you want? And he said, what I'd like to do if I could do anything I want, like big fantasy, I'll never be able to do it, is to just take off 5 years and just raise my son. And the group said, well, have you talked to your wife about that? And well, no, I'm sure that wouldn't be that comfortable for her. So they persuaded me, he said, to talk to my wife. My wife said, yes, go and do what you want to do, John. That sounds like a wonderful thing. So, but he said, I told the group that was totally impossible, because I had multiple contracts that were legal. I couldn't break those contracts or modify them or renegotiate them. And the group told me, well, John, what's the story here? Do you own them or do they own you? Has your success created a prison for you? Or has your success created the ability to be free to work and do what you want with your life? And he said, when confronted with that, I started approaching each of the people that I had contracts with. I ended up getting the ability to be able to take off for 5 years and raise my son. So I said, how old is your son now? And he goes, my son is a year and a half now. I said, well, John, was it a good decision? He said, Warren, it wasn't a good decision. It was by far the best decision of my life. I have written about love, sung about love, but I've never known love until I raised my son. And at that point in time, somebody came over. I just came back from my first book tour. This is the 1970s. And somebody said, could I have your autograph? I thought that they meant my autograph. So I reached up and said, yes, and I interrupted John. And they said, oh, yes, I would like your autograph. They had no idea who I was. And they said, but we would like his autograph in particular. So John just quickly signed it. They gave it back to him. And I said, wow, the quickness with which you signed it, you must be well known. And we'd been talking for about an hour now. I had no idea who he was. And he said, I really prefer to not just, let's do it John and Warren, okay? And then I persuaded him to give me his last name, and he said Lennon, John Lennon. And so I said, John Lennon, I recognize that name. Are you a member of a singing group? And I was so proud of myself that I knew it was a part of a group. And he said, yes. And he said, I said, well, what's the name of the group? And he said, the Beatles, at which point in time I was totally embarrassed. But the point there is that this is a man with a huge amount of money, the most enviable career in the world, probably, one of the most respected people that has ever existed in recent history. And he found more satisfaction from raising his son for 5 years. That supposed hegemonic position of having all that power and that fame and that enviable career was a prison for him until the men's group helped him have the courage to break out of that prison. And that's what we're talking about, the falseness of hegemonic masculinity. Thinking we have the power is our source of powerlessness.
Yeah, I love that story when I read it in your book, Warren. And may I just say, that should be on everyone's bookshelf, not just MRAs. That's a given, but everyone else's as well. Amazing book.
Thank you.
Warren, as you know, this has been the second of our two interviews for the 6th International Conference on Men's Issues, and it's the first time anybody has ever spoken twice, so to speak, at an ICMI. So thank you for giving us so much of your time, and thank you. I know I hopefully here speak on behalf of the global men's rights movement, but to say thank you for your extraordinary body of work over so many years. I mean, the myth of male power, Paul Elam, I've heard him say 20 times that it was that book, The Myth of Male Power, that got him into this, and a great many more besides. So Warren, thank you very much indeed for your time. It's been fascinating.
Thank you. I want to make it really clear too that I was really looking forward to this. I've been interviewed by Elizabeth once before, and her questions were always thoughtful. I've had a long-term respect for you, Mike, and what you're doing. And I really encourage other men to get into small groups on Zoom and talk about what are your talents, how can you contribute. This world will not hear what men don't say. We need to speak up, whether if you're political or you have the ability to sing and create music to inspire. If you're a minister, you're a father, you need to speak up and have the courage of to be rejected, which you will be, and in order to move this world forward, so that women and men understand that we're all in the same family boat, and that when only one sex wins, both sexes lose.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. Thank you, Warren.
Thank you, Warren.
so much.